so much for coming. It's so brilliant. I'm just going to tuck you in here.
Yeah, sure.
That's the one. So it kind of sits on your chest like that.
Sure.
And then talk over the top of it.
Yeah.
There we go. Perfect. Have you done a video podcast before?
No.
Never? Amazing. Have you done any public speaking before since?
I train people, so that's
That would count.
Medium-sized groups.
Welcome to Characters, a show where, in the dawn of AI, we are trying to better understand the human condition. Season 3 is all about our true colours, stripping away the grey and revealing what haunts, excites us and drives our purpose. I'm Jack, and as your host, I aim to provide our guests with a safe space, aware of potential judgment, to promote vulnerability, empathy and humility. On this show, we aren't focused on who our guest is, what they've achieved or their opinion on society. We've included links in the description for that. We're instead interested in how they overcome anxiety, deal with envy, or embrace forgiveness and gratitude. I really hope you can gain and grow from what our guest has taken a leap and shared for our benefit.
We heard you talk, and I'm a massive psychology sort of not trained by any means, but psychotherapy for many years and big struggle with depression and all sorts. So it was incredible to hear you speak. This podcast, Characters, is about exploring such and sort of trying to bring people out from behind their facade.
Yeah.
So it's really up to you whether you want to sit in that chair as somebody that I can ask questions to, or whether you want to basically sit as a professional and talk about what it is that you do and how you help people.
I'm happy to do both.
Happy to do both. Maybe it will end up as a bit of both.
Yeah.
What I've learned is that great conversation starts with a great question.
Right. Okay.
So I've got questions that I try my best to memorize,
right.
But sometimes I forget I lose my thread, and so I have to refer to my phone, which my phone is there.
Yeah.
I'll just get on with it, shall I?
Okay. Yeah.
It's such a pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much for coming. What do you wish people understood about you?
Oh, that I'm very sensitive, actually. I was always told by my father that I was too sensitive, which, I always took as a real criticism. He meant it as a criticism, I think, because he couldn't quite deal with my emotions. But actually, as an adult, I realised that it's probably my greatest asset. Because if I wasn't sensitive, I wouldn't be able to do what I do, which is be able to support people with their emotions. Why I want people to know that about me really is because I think the assumption is that therapists have got it all sorted, and that we can just deal with any situation, no matter how traumatic or difficult, and we can deal with people's attitudes towards us without it really hurting. And it's not true. I'm still very sensitive, so I'm hypervigilant around criticism and things like this, and most people wouldn't know that. And the other aspect to that is I'm actually quite shy, and because of what I do, people assume that I'm really confident. So I'm used to dealing with quite large groups. I did the TED Talk, in front of millions potentially. I think people would assume that I'm very confident and outgoing, and actually, I would say, I'm quite shy. I'm easily hurt, actually, and it takes a lot of work to process that and come back and still be useful. So,
do you think there's an element of that thought being about the person accusing you of being?
Oh, absolutely.
There's projection obviously involved.
Yeah. I mean, people's attitudes towards
therapists.
Towards therapists and towards other people says more about them than it does about the person they're aiming it at. And I kind of know that on a theoretical level. So that, if somebody has a very strong reaction to me, the chances are it's not really about me. It's about how they're seeing me. It's their stuff.
as a threat or otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. Or they see me as an authority figure. I mean, this occasionally happens with students. Not often, but occasionally a student will say, will see me as being quite judgmental, or they're not quite getting what they want from me, and then that can trigger a whole load of stuff of theirs about when they've been let down in the past, or they've had bad experiences of teachers, etc. So I get it on a head level, but emotionally, it's quite hard to be seen in a way that is kind of alien. It's like, how come you see me like that? So, that's where the work comes in. It's like stepping back and thinking, this isn't about me. This is their stuff. And actually, 99% of the time, give it time and they work through it. And they start to see me rather than the father that was not good to them. You know.
And obviously, you had a lot of training and things. When did you sort of come to that realization and understand that idea of projection and be able to take that on from a personal perspective rather than a professional perspective, and go, oh no, it's not about, you know?
I think it's ongoing work, actually. I mean, I kind of first came into contact with it at the beginning of my career, where, you know, I'd be part of a team and other people would say, oh, don't take it on, John, you know, this is their stuff. But I think I have to relearn that all the time. You know, it's it's hard to be seen inaccurately at times. You know, seeing myself through their eyes can be quite, whoa, where did you get that from? Why do you see that? You know, see me like this. And
that's the skill, isn't it? As a totally untrained and only the reading that I've done, and, you know, not practiced at all, but fascinated by, because I direct and I hold interviews and things like that, and that's all psychology, is how to draw things out of people in the best way rather than a mischievous way. Why mischievous came out there, but absolutely fascinated. How did it start for you? Why did you go down this path?
I mean, classic really. In my childhood, I grew up with a brother who's got a severe learning disability. He was strangled by the umbilical cord at birth, and severely learning disability. He's probably got the mental age of a 2-year-old, and he's 6 years older than me. So I think on some really deep level, there was something that I was trying to fix. You know, and I never could, but I think that was a driver for me, trying to fix someone that, and trying to reach him, I think, was something, probably early childhood experiences of. And then the knock-on effects of that, actually, the impact on my parents. And I became a bit of a psychologist and an emotional support, particularly for my dad. He used to lean on me a lot, actually, in a lot of ways, quite inappropriately. Like, you know, I would be his confidant. Rather than the other way around. It was, you know...
You had to be the man in the house.
Yeah, the grown-up, I think. I think I was more his father than he was mine. So I think that's where it started. Also, there was a sense in which when you grow up in a disabled family, the whole family is disabled, and feeling like an outsider. So going out into the world, being very different to other families. And feeling that myself, I think, going to school and realizing that my family was odd. It was different to anybody else's family. And then there's this concept of the natural psychologist, that the response to that is then to try to figure out the rules, try to figure out how other people work. How do you make friends? How do other families operate? So I think that was the origins of it, of just having a fascination for people and kind of studying how the world works, studying how people work, really at quite a visceral level. It's like, that's interesting. They behave like that. And that fascination, I think, has just been with me for life. I went off on a bit of a tangent because I ended up going to university to do physics, which there is some parallels, which is kind of interesting.
Oh, tell me.
Yes. Well, physics is kind of, it's about how the universe works. And modern scientists, they don't hold ideas rigidly. So what you have is, you know, in higher level physics, you talk about developing a model of the universe, and you hold that loosely. And what happens is, as new evidence comes along, you modify your model. So we've gone from Newtonian physics to sort of Einstein and quantum physics, and realizing that we've got to be a lot more flexible in our thinking, because our thinking doesn't necessarily fit reality.
Black and white.
Exactly. And I think this is exactly how we form our way of relating in the world.
Boxes.
I think, what we do is we have a model. So what most of us, well, I would say all of us, we develop a model of the world based on what we've been told as children. So our parents are a huge influence, but they're not the only influence. But we're surrounded by adults that are telling us how things are. This is how you deal with feelings. This is how you should deal with your relationships. This is what you need to do with your life. So there's all that stuff. And we move into adulthood with what I would say is often quite a rigid model of the universe. And what needs to happen is that we need to test it against what we're experiencing. So when we move into the world and we find out that actually our parents weren't particularly right about how the world is, that was just their viewpoint. So the messages that we get as children about how to deal with our emotions, it's largely by witnessing other people, but also they give us very clear messages. And if we hold those rigidly, we're not very adapted to the way the world actually is, or relating to people that are very different. So that those are the parallels, if that kind of makes sense.
Certainly.
There's a kind of rigid model of the universe versus actually amend your model as you go along. You know, I've learned something new. This person doesn't fit my template.
Which is a skill.
Yeah.
And skills need to be practiced and learnt.
Yeah. And there's anxiety there, moving into the unknown.
Absolutely. Yeah. But if that skill, if the beginnings or the early stages of that skill aren't taught early, then you're left. Yeah. And you can try and fill holes with all sorts of things, I assume, addiction or whatever it is, to try and
I mean, talking about the kind of the skill of learning to manage one's emotions, I always say to my students that emotions are pretty much universal. They're part of human beings. People feel the same emotions all over the world. What to do about them, we have to learn. So it's a bit like hunger. You know, feeling hungry is part of being a human being. Knowing what to do about your hunger, we have to be taught. So somebody has to say to you, okay, that's hunger, and this is what you need to do when you're hungry. This is how you get food and how you prepare food, and this is how you satisfy your hunger. The same's true with emotions. So if our parents, particularly our parents, they're the primary ones, don't either sort of identify our emotions accurately, or they don't model how to deal with them. Like, you learn from your parents about what to do when you're sad. And my experience is like most families have blind spots, that they're good at some emotions but not others. You know, you have families that just don't do anger. And then you grow up and you move into the world and actually you come across people that are angry. You've got no idea how to deal with it. It's actually quite frightening. If you've not grown up actually understanding conflict as being part of relationships, it's not necessarily destructive. So,
active listening, being able to have somebody who was there who was actually able to hear you and your emotions and feelings at that time.
Exactly. And without that, we're kind of drowning a bit. And the case, I mean, you mentioned there that if I haven't learned as a child how to deal with my distress, like when I'm upset, when I'm hurting, then where do I get it from? And unfortunately, sometimes the first time somebody gets soothed is when they discover alcohol, for instance. And so, you have a drink when you're 12, 13. And it's like, for the first time in my life, I actually feel relaxed. I feel calm. I'm in good company. This is great. And it's the only way you then know how to deal with, say, anxiety, is using drugs or alcohol. Because you haven't learned, how to deal with it more organically. So it's a strategy that then kind of, it makes sense on an emotional level. And that's the core of it. That's, I've not learned how to deal with this. So I then use a chemical to change my emotional state, which is really what all addiction's about.
If I may, in what ways are you prone to addiction?
somebody asked me this the other day, and I thought, actually, I think I'm addicted to work, which is one of those acceptable addictions, but it's not good. I tend to be a bit of a magpie, and I just keep grabbing things, and whenever I see a need, I kind of say, oh yeah, I'll do something about that. I'll run a course, I set up an organization. And before I know it, it's like, it's too much. And things get neglected, like time off. And, I'm realizing that, I don't really have any hobbies. It's like work is everything. And it's not good, So yeah, I think that's my primary addiction.
Addiction, obsession? It sounds, you're very driven.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure the difference in a way. I suppose
Sure.
Addiction, it's a way of maybe avoiding something.
But you can be, perhaps it's because you're doing it because you want to help people.
Yeah.
I mean, that's abundantly clear.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's the whole element of, forget about me, I'm not important, which is the self-sabotage and all of that whole
That's the
side of
dangerous
things.
bit. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the horrendous bit.
Yeah,
Did you say horrendous?
Dangerous.
Dangerous
But
bit.
yes, horrendous. Yeah.
Horrendous as well. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm talking to a mirror right now because Ben will testify to the fact that I'm a total workaholic as well. So,
Right.
so it's wonderful to be in the room opposite one with much greater knowledge than me in the field. So, this is going to be great.
Right.
Really, I mean, it is that kind of not self-sabotage. It's the I don't deserve a break.
Yes. Yeah, I think the dangerous element of it is other people's needs are more important than my own, and when I get into that is really quite unhealthy. And I think that has its roots again in my childhood. I was always kind of taught to put my brother's needs first because he's got a serious disability. And that was my parents' attitude. He came first. I was okay. I didn't really have any needs as far as they were concerned because it was all comparative. It's like, compared to him, you've got it all right. And I think that's stuck at a very deep level for me. And I'm still quite slow to recognize my needs. And that's where the workaholic bit comes in. I'll jump at other people's requirements. If somebody says, "Oh, can I meet with you to get some help over this?" And it's like, "Yeah, absolutely." I say, "Hang on a minute, I'm really tired. I haven't had a day off for weeks." And I'm still really slow. I'm really slow to go to the doctor if there's something wrong. It doesn't occur to me, and so it's still a work in progress.
As it always is. I think.
Yeah.
You're never cured.
No.
Cured.
No,
like
you just get quicker at recognising it, hopefully.
It is a skill. It is practice, and I think that's kind of a message that if I ever want to send, I have a big complex around the industry that we work in, which is cameras and taking ownership of people's stories. That's basically the nature of putting a camera in front of somebody, and I have a resentment for that because it's all about taking.
Right.
In a way. I mean, obviously, that these days, this video might help you in certain ways for your brand or business or whatever, and its exposure and its marketing. But there is still an element of that, I think. And I always feel like I have a duty to give something back to the person that I'm talking to. Not in a material way, but in another way, in an emotional way, or something that they can take away and reflect on, perhaps. And again, fascination. And maybe I should step aside and study more officially because I've become quite obsessed with it. But it must be so fulfilling.
Yeah. The first interview I ever had when I was about 20, the interviewer said, "This work is never boring," and he was near to retirement. And that is probably the single statement that sticks in my mind about the whole of my career, that if you really engage and you keep up in your risk level, in a sense of keep doing the work, it's never boring. That even working with a single individual, you could work with one client for 5 years and there will still be something new coming up, you know, if you're working well. And the field is so huge, you know, it's anybody and everything. So yeah, it's absolutely limitless. And I still feel like a complete beginner at times. There's this kind of beginner's mind where you just say, actually, this person's unique. This is a new situation. I've got no idea about this.
And you have to clean your slate. Beginner's mind.
Yeah, you've got to be open to that particular individual. You know, all the theories in the world are nothing compared to the actual interaction, the relationship, and the unique individual. You know, they don't necessarily fit the model that you've already got. They could be completely outside that, you know, and that's amazing, you know.
Never boring, absolutely. No. Therapists aren't perfect, which is fantastic to hear, really. But also, I would know that certainly mine and others that I've known or been acquainted with would admit as much. Absolutely, you know, out of the gate.
Yeah.
Tell me about envy.
Envy? Or envy in other people in the field?
Tell me about your envy, your relationship to envy, and then perhaps we can explore envy as a subject, professional subject.
I don't tend to feel it very much, actually. I was thinking about this the other day, and I thought I don't have kind of people that I'm envious of. I mean, even professionally, I don't look at other people and think, oh, I wish I was like them. It's just not something I tend to do. I could be envious of a lifestyle, I think. You know, I quite like people that have got a bit more balance to their life, and they've got plenty of leisure time and they've got hobbies and things. So yeah, I think I could be envious of that. People that probably are a bit more balanced in their life.
What would those hobbies be?
Well, I've been playing around the idea of doing some acting, actually.
Oh,
I think that would be fun. Yes. And partly that was the experience with Ted as well. I liked the coaching bit, and I felt that I was learning new skills. You know, it was a very different way of me performing, really, than what I usually do. When I train people, it's more like a conversation in a group. This was deliver. You know, it's a
true performance.
Yeah, a very different experience, but I liked that process of learning how to do it, and I think I'm a real beginner in that field, and I'd love to get some more. I'd love to just go off and do an acting course, you know, do a really meaty one, you know.
So you go and do acting, I'll go and study psychology, and then
and
we can meet back in a couple of years.
Yes, no, it would. I think it would just be really fun, and it reminded me. It took me right back to primary school when we did stage shows and that, and the buzz that I got. I think I did something in the secondary school as well, but it dried up quite early, probably about 13, 14. That was the end of my performing. But it took me right back. I could remember the buzz of performing, and the last night when it's all gone really well and the audience goes ballistic and you have a party, and the energy, the kind of the team effort. And I felt that with Ted. I felt really proud to be part of that team, that everybody that was involved, you know, it was you guys and, you know, the coaching, and we had the speech and language therapist voice coach, was helping us, and then all the social media stuff. And it's just like, this was a fabulous sort of team. And there's just a great collective energy. I was like, I want to do more of that, you know.
Common thread amongst actors and acting, you know, you hear about from a psychology point of view, is that, you know, they don't have to be themselves.
Yes.
So is there an element of that for you, do you think?
No, probably not, actually. And maybe that's something I'd like to develop, the ability to step outside and be completely different. You know, there is a form of therapy that really works on that. It's called psychodrama. And the idea is that you pull out the parts of your personality that you don't normally bring out. The guy that developed it, his argument was that we get limited because we have a limited choice of roles that we're willing to go with.
Put ourselves in a box.
Yeah, so I always deal with things this way. And he was like, well, bring out another personality, you know, that we can be anything and everything.
you meet somebody for the first time, they know nothing about you. You know, you could be presenting yourself in an entirely different way.
That would be fun. Yes,
that's a fantastic idea. At the first I've heard of it. That's
it's about increasing your range, you know, your repertoire. So, and you know, the guy came up with a guy called Jacob Marino, and he was saying, well, you should be spontaneously responding in the moment, and use your full repertoire. That, you know, not stick to the old rigid ways of being.
More tools in your toolbox.
Yeah, and I think we all have a tendency to kind of label ourselves and say, I'm this, you know, like I'm shy, you know. Well, always. Does that have to be the case? Can that change? And this literal experimenting with being different, you know, and I think acting's a really good route to that. Is actually try embodying a completely different way of being. And in a way, it's not false. It's just bringing another self.
That was going to be my next question. Like, could it ever be true?
I think we are capable of anything in terms of in terms of ways of being a human being. I've not really thought this through. So
no, but this is part of it. The explorative is the nature of this. So it's great.
I mean, what occurs to me is that we potentially have the full range of human behaviour within us, and it's about trying to discover that. So going on a journey to say, well, can I be really aggressive, or could I be really, I don't know. Pretending to, it starts by pretending to be something, but actually in order to do it, you've got to have it within you. You know, so you've got
fake
to
it
find
till you make
place.
it kind of idea.
Yeah, but the moment you're starting to fake it, you're pulling on some actual skills. You know, if you want to pretend that you're good at maths, you're going to have to learn some maths to do that. You know, and before you know it, you have developed that attribute.
Like this idea that confidence is a skill.
Yes, I think it is. Yeah, I think you can work that muscle, and I certainly know I've done that over the years. That because I think my default is fairly shy and introverted, constantly working in groups has actually made groups easier for me. I'm now quite comfortable in groups,
and now doing talks.
Yeah. I think it's been a progression. And I remember that when I'm with other people, you know, when I'm working with the students and somebody's really frightened in the group, so I find groups really difficult. It's like, I remember that. I remember being really scared in a group and doing the work to get confident and get grounded with people. So, yeah, I'm a great fan of this, developing these muscles, really. You know.
It's fabulous. It's absolutely wonderful. To what extent do you feel like life is elsewhere?
I don't think. I think most of my time I'm spent in really quite authentic experiences with people being really authentic. One of the cliches in the training world, when you're training to be a therapist, is students often will say, I'm really not looking forward to going back out into the real world. I say, well, isn't this real? And then when I say that, I say, actually, I've been more real in this group than I am outside. So it's about the quality of connection and how authentic people are being. And you can have these really amazing moments where people are being really authentic. So the real life is happening here. And actually it's outside that tends to be the fake, the phony.
And such a challenge for people who have an understanding of this. I'm talking basically about myself in the second person, but, it can be a real challenge to be the listener all the time, because many people have things that they need to get out quite clearly.
Yes.
You know, to me now, I can sort of understand when somebody needs to get something out.
Yeah.
And I am the listener. And it comes as sort of a default setting now. And what I've sort of realised is that's become now a comfort. Because now I don't need to talk about me.
Yes.
I can just let the other person do the talking. And it's this constant pendulum of like, am I Am I being too? Am I? I've come from a very narcissistic place. That's my default setting, and now I'm hyper aware of that.
Right.
I've swung the other way, but then is that I'm not getting the output that I need. Yeah. And so, how do you turn off?
I do kind of have a sense of being off duty at times, which is important. It's a bit of a joke in my family. It's like, I'm off duty right now. I'm not, I'm not going to be the counsellor at 11 o'clock at night. Yeah. So that's important. And I remember one of my trainers, she used to say, I said to her, how come when I'm out in public or sitting on the bus, people just like start talking to me, And it's a thing a lot of trainee counsellors say, where you've got the kind of strange person on the bus who just starts telling you everything and talking. And she said it's because you don't flinch. And it's developing that quality, which you then need to learn to switch off. So most of my students will say that actually they're the sort of person that all their friends come and lean on, or, they're the ones that are doing all the supporting. And they realise that actually their relationships are quite one-sided. That they're the support, they're the grown-up, and actually everybody leans on them. And it's learning to work that switch. It is this kind of like, actually, what about me? And I'm not always going to be there, and I'm not always. I don't want one-sided relationships, And they call counselling the divorce course, because people change in that process of learning counselling skills, and they start to learn about unequal relationships and realize, and it can be quite hard, but realizing that you've got people in your life that are leaning on you all the time. It's a one-way transaction. And then they realize that when they start stating their needs, the person's not interested. They don't like it. It's, well, actually, I'm feeling a bit down today. Oh, well, And it's like, okay, this is not very satisfying. And yes, that can include sort of intimate relationships that are unequal. So that's a long answer to your question.
No, it's fascinating.
But it's, there is something, I think it's a necessity to work the switch, and to say, I'm not always up for people leaning on me or having a crisis, or, sometimes, I don't want to listen. I want somebody to listen to me. Which is what's happening here. This is amazing.
Well, no, I mean, it's fantastic. It's a real honour, actually. It's wonderful. And I love that work the switch idea. Is fantastic, because it has to be in a way. I mean, you have to be there for your friends and the people that you are around and things, but then they also have to be there for you. Absolutely. But there's this idea that's been going around my head of perhaps an expectation with social media and things now, that because information is out there, that one has to be everything for everyone.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's only me, because I'm sure it isn't, because it never is. But it's an idea I've really struggled with. It's like, well, where, this idea of weakness of strength. I have my strengths, and alongside every one of those strengths is a comparative weakness. So it's impossible for somebody to be everything for everything to somebody. And monogamous relationships is the prime example. Where there's this expectation where you're the co-parent, you're the lover, you're the taxi driver, you're the all of it. And it's and is that unreasonable?
Yes.
In a word.
And also there's a limit to our capacity. I mean, we all get tired. We all need time off. And I think not recognizing that limit to your capacity is again really quite harmful, because you're pushing beyond. You're saying, I can, you've run out of fuel. Yeah, there's something in what you're saying about being all things to all people. Is that actually, you can be nothing to no one for a while. I was reading something earlier actually about the need for nothingness. That it's a bit of a cliche, but the way we're living our lives at the moment is so kind of overwhelming. There's so much stuff coming at us all the time. And it was Brené Brown actually was talking about the antidote to overwhelm is nothingness. That what we need is just to stop sometimes and nothing's going on, no input. I had a really interesting experience a couple of years ago. I went off on summer holiday and I took all these books with me. I thought I'd get some reading done. And I realised that I didn't want any input at all for nearly the whole 2 weeks. I think it got to the end of the 2 weeks when I thought, getting a bit bored. And thought about picking up a book. It was 2 weeks, and I thought, what's going on? And I realised that I was so full that I actually needed 2 weeks of no input, nothing. I wasn't even interested in watching a movie or anything. I just got so full up, and I really remember that now and think, how when is enough? There's too much input. And we are getting it from so many different directions now. First thing I do in the morning is look at my phone, and it's like emails, check bank accounts, all sorts of stuff. It's crazy, right up until going to bed at night. It's like the amount of stuff that I'm kind of processing. I mean, a metaphor is like the emails, 50 emails a day. It's like, what? I can't possibly manage that, really. You actually have to start delegating and get other people to manage your stuff for you because it's too much stuff. And
then you're managing those people.
Yes,
Is it more complicated or not? I don't know.
Yeah. No, it's a kind of craziness.
Have you spent much time in the East around Eastern philosophy?
A bit.
Because they've got mindfulness
a
bit better over there.
Yes, absolutely. I think there's a better balance of lifestyle. I spent over a year in India. I was working in India for a while, and there was a more laid-back attitude generally. I mean, everybody, the whole of the society, would think nothing about having a nap in the afternoon. It wasn't quite a siesta. It was just something you did. I remember we were setting up an office, and the guy said to me, we need a cot, meaning a bed, in the office. What do you mean? Oh, no, you need a bed in the office. And it's like it was standard practice to have a nap in the office in the afternoon. That's what people did, and they would do it in corporations. I was like, wow, that's a bit more balanced, really. It's a bit like, and realizing that, that helped their performance. And I've heard they do this in Japan as well. They have power naps at work. So, isn't that an interesting way of looking at things and being sensitive to our physical needs?
That rest is part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've tried to do that a little bit recently. I've tried to, getting into sort of walking just to get some exercise. And I had to kind of tell myself that was actually work time, because on that walk, I'm actually processing things. I'm thinking about stuff. I'm working.
And you come up with the best ideas when you do
absolutely. Well. And realising that headspace is really important, and that I've not normally allowed myself. It's a new thing for me to say, right, I need to go for an hour-long walk every day to think, and feel so much better for it. That actually it's a mini version of that summer holiday where I think I just need some time out every day. And that's where sort of mindfulness and meditation comes in. Mindfulness is just a kind of reinvention of
catch-all term for
It's that stopping still and just noticing what's going on for you.
As I actually prefer the way you put it, just no input.
Yes, yeah. This is time for me to check out myself and not to keep fielding stuff coming at me. Just time out. I think it's a really useful thing. There's been experiments with school kids and doing it, and it's been really effective. It's been a very effective way of dealing with discipline, actually. Because more often than not, that's what's required. The kid actually needs to learn to self-soothe and figure out what's going on with them rather than constantly reacting, which is what's getting them into trouble. It's all knee-jerk and overwhelm. So, yeah.
Oh my God, I could talk to you talk to you all day, honestly. So it's absolutely wonderful. I think what do you encounter most? What problems, is there an overwhelming sort of problem that people that you work with struggle with?
Yeah, I'm really of the opinion lately, after kind of 40 years in the field, I think actually it all boils down to one's relationship with oneself. That whatever you're struggling with in life, it's what's going on internally that makes or breaks you. That's what either means that you resolve things or you're your own enemy. So, self-talk, yeah, and I think we all have different parts to us. We all have kind of like sub-personalities in us. And it's in our language, isn't it? Oh, a part of me thinks this, a part of me thinks that. And we multitask, which means that there's different consciousnesses, which is fascinating. So when you're driving the car, you drive the car home, you're thinking about all sorts of stuff. There's all sorts of things going on and everything. You're not actually paying attention to the driving, but part of you is. Because if somebody steps out in front of the car, you'll respond like that. Not a problem. So that's a really simplistic example of there's two of you right there. There's a part of you that's thinking and fantasizing and having all sorts of conversations in your head, and there's part of you that's driving the car. So those two parts are working simultaneously. And I think this is true, that we've got multiple parts to us that are doing sometimes different jobs. There's different parts of us that might not be getting on. And that's what I see time and time again, that actually when somebody's really struggling, it's what's going on inside them that is really causing them the distress. They're constantly criticizing themselves, for instance. There's this idea, this inner critic, this voice on your shoulder that's constantly putting you down and slagging you off. It's like, well, that's not a very nice way to live. You imagine if you were walking around and somebody was following you all day, every day, having a go at you. You wouldn't put up with it. It's just like, this is horrible. I'm being bullied. But most people do that internally. There's an internal critic. So yeah, I think that is what a lot of the work really boils down to, is about people's relationship with themselves. And that some of those sub-personalities are kind of absorbed from our background, from our history. So people may have had, say, quite an abusive father, and then as they reach adulthood, there's an internalized abusive father that picks up where dad left off, just takes over. And you've got to kind of deal with it. And it's not as simple as getting rid of it. It's there for a reason, and it kind of needs to be honored and understood and respected, that critic. So yeah, it's not straightforward. It's not like get rid of that part of you. That part of you has its uses. It's just a bit overzealous.
As you said at the start, it's all led you to learn that that's actually your sensitiveness is the best part of you.
Yeah, and not something that should be criticised. Actually, it's like, well, there's a reason for that, and actually, it's an asset. And the same even with the kind of critic. The critic is trying to look after you and keep you safe. So keep your head down, don't get into trouble. And it's just a bit overzealous. So, okay, well, I get what you're doing, but, just calm down a bit. Things are okay. I don't need you on my case all day, every day.
We are very good at cracking on, like getting on with things, at functioning.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an interesting word when you talk about this subject. And on that basis, what's it all for?
Yeah.
What's the goal of therapy for somebody, other than obviously perhaps a bit more contentment? But do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think there's something that I'd love, this phrase that I heard decades ago where somebody said, let me take you gently by the hand and lead you back to you. And that's a beautiful idea of, this is about kind of self-discovery, working out who I am, what matters to me, how I function. And the process of therapy is often about people actually uncovering the bits that are causing them pain and learning that they can do something about it.
Putting the bags down.
Yeah, and just say, well, actually, I don't have to carry on doing it like this. I don't have to carry on in an unhappy job or an unhappy relationship. I can do something about it. And it sounds really simple, but actually I think it's a very profound moment when somebody realizes that they can change their situation. There was a fabulous example I heard the other day. I was supervising another therapist, and she was talking about a client that was hoarding, and hoarding to such a huge extent that the house was absolutely crammed full. And what she managed to get the client to do is clear a small space in the kitchen. That was the goal. And the client was elated. This was huge because of that profound realization that she could change this overwhelm. She could actually do a small thing about changing it. And then once you know that, it's like, wow, maybe there's other things I can change. Maybe I can take on the rest of the mess. You know, it's that. So in a way, that's what it's about. It's about, I think people really getting to understand themselves and find out how they work. And getting out of the way of themselves, because I think we have a natural tendency to heal if we stop getting in the way. If we stop blocking ourselves from identifying our feelings and doing something about them. You know, that's the block. It's like, I don't want to look at it. I don't want to go there. You know, it's the monster in the closet. As long as you keep the monster in the closet, you just spend your life disabled. You know, you've got to open the closet door and make friends with the monster.
That monster does grow.
Yeah.
And then midlife crisis.
Yeah. I mean, the other metaphor I like is like, if you run away from your problems, you get further away from the solution, which you do. It's like, you know, I'm just going to avoid. It's not going anywhere. And yes, it's likely to grow. So your world gets smaller and smaller as you're avoiding this monster.
Because anything that's required to make sure that door remains closed.
Yeah, and that all your energy is going into blocking rather than resolving. It's really interesting. Nightmares are a really interesting experience that people have. That nightmares often are, you get so terrified that you wake up, and so it doesn't resolve. And one of the things we do in therapy is actually help people to finish the nightmare. So you go back and you face the monster, and it turns out that the monster starts to dissolve, and you realize that the monster is a part of you. It's a really fascinating process. I've seen it happen time and time again, that this thing that you're running away from is some kind of essential truth that you've just been blocking. You know.
Come on then. I had a nightmare the other night.
Oh, okay. Right.
It was actually an old client of mine.
Right.
And called me into a room like he was my boss.
Right.
Although I'd sort of forever been freelance and never had a boss other than, you know. And it was a number of nights ago, so it's probably a bit hazy now. But I'm trying to remember the detail. Basically said that they weren't happy with the work that I was doing, or oh no, it was actually the fact that there's a podcast company, and I've started my own podcast. I used to have a podcast before, but now I've started this one, and he wasn't happy with the fact that I was doing my own, even though it was on a completely different subject, entirely unrelated, and that wasn't acceptable, basically. And he basically just brought me in, even though he had no authority to in the real world, but in the nightmare, in the dream. I don't know if I call it a nightmare, but certainly vivid, and said that it was unacceptable. And so now, if I sort of think about that, I sort of feel like I woke up and it didn't really resolve, as you just said, which is why I'm telling you this. But so thinking about that, you know, I grew up with two parents who were arguing all the time.
Right.
They separated eventually when I was 11, and and so I really struggle with contention and arguments and all of that. And so thinking about that dream now, I was thinking, well, before I sort of feel like I would have felt crushed by the idea that this was unacceptable to somebody who's superior to me in my brain. But now I kind of feel like, hang on a minute, this is, you don't really have a right to say that. It doesn't really matter that you feel that way. You might feel potentially threatened by that idea. I don't think this is about me.
Right.
Maybe.
I mean, what occurs to me is actually, if we were to work this in a therapy session, I would sort of get you to imagine something else in the room. So an object, or have you got a sense of
where we were? I think because we used to work in his house. I think we were somewhere there, maybe, or just a generic office.
Right.
An office space. Definitely his space, not a my space.
Okay. Is there something in the room that you remember?
It was two of them.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just us two, but it was kind of. It was a studio, basically. It was there were the standard plants, that fill the green in the.
Okay.
It was a set.
Okay.
Effectively.
So what I'd be interested in is if you were to be the plant. Just pick one of the plants, and the plant is observing this scene, having a look at you two talking to each other. What would the plant be thinking about what's going on?
I think the plant would be thinking that there is some tension here, but there are some adults in the room having a discussion about something that's causing tension, but that it's not escalating into a row or an argument.
Right. So is it okay?
So it's okay.
Yeah.
But it has stayed with me, and I try and, and there's another one that I used to talk about, I had for years, that was reoccurring, and I learned that reoccurring was always, still trying to send you this message. Yeah. Which was driving down very fast down a road with big, massive, spiky gates. We were driving, and I was crashing through those gates in the car. I don't know whether somebody was a passenger or exactly, but I was, and it was gate after gate, and just smashing through these gates, very fast, very chaotic, and then I call him a very good friend now, Peter Berry. You may know him. He's same as you, very, very well experienced therapist. He's St.Albans based. And he said, bloody escapes me now, but he's again like you guys have a habit of doing. He said one line, and it was just like, that's it, and just making that link again. Yeah, but it was quite a few years ago now.
What occurs to me about that dream you mentioned about the conflict with the guy is you also said that there was a lot of conflict in your childhood between your parents, and that probably was quite overwhelming and quite horrible. And something's shifted, so it's like now you're seeing a conflict and being okay with it. It's okay that this conflict is happening. So it feels quite validating in a way.
Big time. Because I ended up in therapy because I couldn't pick up the phone to order a pizza.
Right. Yeah.
Because I was worried about what the person on the end of the phone thought of me if I couldn't say the order or thought I was an idiot or whatever, which is again what brings me back to this whole full circle, 4 or 5 years of therapy. Narcissism, effectively. I was so worried what the other person thought about me, and I didn't think for 2 seconds for the other person, what the other person was probably thinking, which is, what the fuck's your order? I don't really care about blah, blah, blah. Just spit it out so I can take your order and get on with my day.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, massive full circle, just the realisation that actually it's not all about me.
Yeah, but a very painful place to be.
It was.
You know, it's
was.
not, I mean, I think that feels like quite a criticism to say it's narcissism. I think, it's seeing yourself as the centre of the universe, but in some ways you are, because you're witnessing the universe from sitting where you are. What it strikes me as is a hell of a lot of anxiety about being judged, because you know what that's like. It's it's like, well, fair enough that you're really worried about being judged. And in a way, if you look at that idea I was saying about the relationship with the self, you're projecting a critical self onto everybody. So the guy on the end of the phone is another critical character, because the whole world is critical in your view at the time. Yeah.
Big time.
Yeah. And actually not having enough experience of the world not being, I guess. It takes a lot of time to realize that your model of the world being hypercritical is flawed. The world is not hypercritical all the time.
Mostly.
Yeah.
Don't really care.
Yeah, right.
Because they're all getting on with their own lives. Is my
absolutely.
Point.
Yeah. It's that paranoid feeling that when you walk into a crowded room, everybody's looking at you.
Yeah,
no,
sure.
they're not. They didn't even notice you.
Yeah, and that's a. I mean, again, it's waves. It's every day is different, but that can still be very real struggle.
Yeah.
And that's where I have linked it to narcissism. But I guess the kind of way of putting it, being the friend to yourself, is exactly as you say, is
it's an anxiety. Yeah, absolutely. And it's trying to soothe that anxiety. It's the work, isn't it? It's like, and part of that is recognizing that the whole world is not looking at you, and your anxiety is understandable though. And it's working through that. Yeah.
But I guess that that part of the reason why I guess I've started this project is it's about learning. It's expanding my knowledge of in this field and understanding how people work, much as yourself, but also wanting to show it and share it with a little bit of ego in there as well. I'm constantly thinking, do I need to be in a chair opposite the person that I'm talking about? Can it just be an interview, kind of set up? And why is that important? And is it important? And format and all these kind of things. And it's constant kind of dragging myself through these barriers to figure out, if it's appropriately motivated and is this about me or is this about others? And it's this, it's this constant thing. So
we exist in relationship. So what you're doing and the way you're doing it is relational, which I think is great. The best interviews I've seen on telly are relational. There's something about the interviewer that brings out some authenticity in the interviewee, and I think that will show on your podcasts. That actually you are present, you're part of the process, and why shouldn't that be a thing? That it's a conversation. I think that kind of stark interviewing where it's just the interviewee, cuts out that whole relational aspect. It
becomes almost more objective.
Absolutely.
And we're all here viewing you rather than it being,
There's a parallel in the therapy world, which is your classic psychoanalysis, is where the analyst is off. Off and away, and it's like it's just the client. Actually, there's another whole school of thought that says that the best therapy is relational. It's two people in relationship, and that's where the healing takes place. And that's often what's been missing in people's lives. So, the parent that was absent or the parent that was abusive is what's missing. I think you said it earlier about somebody just acknowledging what the child is feeling.
Sort of having a voice.
Yeah, and the growth happens within a relational context. And that's also where the healing happens. So, what you're setting up is almost like a therapeutic conversation, which I think is a nice way of doing this.
Well, I can't tell you how wonderful that is, coming from somebody as yourself with the experience that you have, because I kind of started this on. Didn't really know what it was, but I knew there was something. I had the power, the ability, the space to do something to share what I think I'm trying to put my finger on something.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm getting closer to that. And I think it sort of boils down to sharing something that I feel society is really lost, which is empathy.
Yeah. There's, I can go off into the film world a bit if that's okay.
Please do.
One of the things I've noticed, particularly in American movies, but I think it's pretty rife throughout all movies, is it's fiercely individualistic. So there is the main character. I mean, I'm actually quite into 24 as a series, but there's part of me that kind of cringes at it because whatever happens, Jack's got to deal with it. Yeah, there's a whole team there, but there's this one person has to do all of it. And I think our world's a little bit like that, where the individual is singled out and they're not seen within a context of relationships or being part of a team. It feels very narrow. It's like the spotlight is on one person. And it's a distorted way of seeing how the world is. We are part of a community. We're part of a group. And it has problems, I think, because the individual also then gets scapegoated. So, when there's a problem, it's seen as the individual's faulty somehow. And this is even a problem in the therapy world, that it's a bit too focused on the individual and doesn't take into account enough the context. There's some people who are depressed because their life is really crap. They're poor. They live in an awful environment. And you take the person out and say, this person is suffering from depression. You're doing them a disservice because actually their environment is horrible.
No wonder they're depressed.
Exactly. It's the alcoholic living on the streets. It's like, well, you'd want to be drunk if you were living on the streets. You'd want to be off your face because the environment is horrible. So there is something about kind of bucking that trend and saying that what makes life actually, go back to your other question, what makes life worth living is relationship. It's about connection and being with other people in an authentic way. It's not about putting one person under the spotlight and drilling them. I don't think that's a very healthy way of going about things.
I think if there is a goal for this, just thinking about this and having the opportunity to reflect with you, I think this is about seeing if I can make a change in getting people to perhaps be more inclined to ask the question, what's going on for you?
Yeah.
And actually be interested.
Yeah.
Rather than waiting to respond,
Yeah. There's a lovely quote by Einstein. He says, there's nothing particularly special about me. I'm just passionately curious. And I like that idea about being passionately curious, that you're seeking out, somebody's truth. Who are they? What makes them tick? It is endlessly fascinating. Go for it.
This is absolutely tremendous.
Right. Okay.
Really brilliant. I'm thrilled and so excited and delighted that you're here. Is there anything you regret not doing due to fear?
Oh, plenty of times when I was younger of not asking the girl out for a date. I think I've always had a fairly kind of low self-esteem in things like that, to the extent that I've looked back on times in my life and thought, hang on a minute, I think she liked me 6 months later or a year later. So yeah, I think I genuinely missed some opportunities, I think, which could have been really fun, and that is largely due to kind of fairly low self-esteem. I just assuming that somebody wouldn't be into me, and not noticing the signs. So yeah, I think not risk-taking relationally in terms of relationships, I think is a bit of a regret. Fear of failure, I think. I've got that in a very general sense as well around languages. I never learnt a language other than English, and I really wish I had. And I think there's a fear element to that my memory of trying to learn a language was a real embarrassment, and feeling quite ashamed of pronouncing things in badly. So I think fear got in the way of me developing that skill, and I'm so impressed by people who can speak another language. I think it's I've got quite a few friends that are fluent in other languages, and that's amazing. It would be really good. Same with music, actually. I really envy people that envy. There is envy. I envy people. Yeah, I envy people that can pick up an instrument and play. We've just had a residential retreat with my students, and there was 3 professional musicians in the group. And, just to walk over to the piano and play it.
And jam.
Wow, that is so cool. I'd love to be able to do that. And I think that all comes back to fear as well. I dabbled a bit as a child, and I think I just didn't have the push really to put myself out there, to produce music. I'd love to be able to do that now. Yeah. That's another potential hobby, actually. Learn the guitar or something.
Yeah.
But I'd want a really exciting teacher that can inspire me. My memory of music lessons was very stuffy and off-putting.
The recorder.
Yeah. Violin. It was like, oh God. Strangling a cat. But, and again, I've met some people as an adult that are really funky. That are just, oh God, I'd really like you to teach me the guitar because they're fun. And so fear.
Do you feel you live an ordinary or an extraordinary life?
In some regards, I think it's quite extraordinary. In terms of the people I've met, the work I do, I think is just so fulfilling, really. And I've often stopped and thought, I could be doing something that actually has no essential meaning, and how soul destroying that would be. I see other people's lives, and one of the things that really hit me actually, going into London, for something, and seeing how a lot of people live, and feeling really desperately sad that people that commute into a job in an office. And this is not putting down at all, it's the complete opposite. I just feel such empathy for, almost the nobility, the courage to do that, to kind of go to some job in the city, to earn a crust, to support a family, and probably be quite miserable, to do something that you don't really believe in, but, needing to do it, to kind of make ends meet and to support a family. And I just see a lot of sadness in that, really. So, when I think about that, I feel really grateful that I do something that is meaningful for me, and I think makes a difference. And the thing that's extraordinary is the ripple effects. So every now and then I get in touch with the idea that I'm training counsellors that will all go off and work with other people, and the volume. I supervise, I think 22 supervisees at the moment, And if you take on average, say every one of those supervisees has, say, 20 clients while I'm seeing them, I'm supervising 400 clients on one level. And what all those clients go on and do and how they are in the world, the ripple effects are enormous. I think I said in my TED talk that I think I've trained about 400 counsellors. If all of those 400 counsellors touch, hundreds of people in their careers, that ripple effect is immense. We're talking thousands, possibly, that can be affected because I did something with a student counsellor that taught them to be more skillful. I hope. And I have had students come back to me from 25, 30 years ago and said, "Oh, you really inspired me." And said, "Wow, that's such an honour. That I said something that made a difference that then they take out into the world." And the ripple effects in their personal life as well as their professional life feels extraordinary. I'm pleased.
Extraordinary.
Yeah.
Do me a favour and define emotional intelligence for me.
Ooh. I think it's being aware and comfortable with your own emotions, and then that means you can be aware and comfortable with other people's, and learning how they work. So the more familiar we get with feelings, the more skillful we become in being okay with them, and learning to express them in a way that is useful.
And charming.
Yes. Yeah. It's good stuff.
Truly, great stuff. John, I can't tell you, I really, really appreciate your time and you coming on. Thank you so much for coming to chat. Wonderful. All right, life changed. Sorted.
It's all sorted. Oh. Cool.
Thank you for watching Characters. I hope you were able to gain and grow from our guests' vulnerability. To discover more characters, please subscribe to support the show and allow us to share more of our true colours. Here's the latest episode, or one YouTube has picked for you. Enjoy.